Welcome to the Shattering Inequities podcast, where we uncover the bold, research-driven strategies that are transforming education for every student, especially those historically left behind. In each episode, we'll highlight leaders who are not just imagining a better future, but actively creating one. Through real-world successes, challenges, and actionable insights, this podcast is the space to crowdsource solutions that advance shattering inequities in education. And now, here's your host, Dr. Robin Avelar La Salle.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shattering Inequities podcast, where we believe that every student is entitled to the premium education that only some historically receive. And we believe that every child is entitled to that premium education, no matter where they live, where they go to school, or what their circumstance. As you know by now, we have two goals. One is to inform and inspire by involving guests who have demonstrated a challenge to that dastardly inevitability assumption, says that some students, by the very group they belong to, are more or less equipped for high levels of academic pursuit. So we involve only guests who have demonstrated results for students that historically are predicted not to achieve at those levels. And secondly, our goal is to conduct research. We're crowdsourcing the best intelligence from our guests and from our audience to contribute to the field information that we glean from these various sets of interviews that we're doing. And so today it is with extreme glee and delight that I invite an eminent educator to our show. This is Ilsa Garza Gonzalez, Superintendent of the Fallbrook Union High School District in a very interesting part of California, who actually has challenged that inevitability assumption in word and deed and has become well known for that. And so thank you, Ilsa, for agreeing to share your experience, your insight, and your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor.
I'm very excited to have you here because your results are definitely not what is predicted for the community and population that you serve. Let me start by just leading with that. Can you just share with us some of the outcomes your students are experiencing since you've started in your district? And while you're doing that, tell us a little bit about your district and why these results have amassed the attention that they have.
Yes. So Fallbrook Union High School District is a small school district, what is considered small by the state of California, any school district with under 2,500 students. And that brings with it some challenges for myself and for our administrators because we wear many hats. So I don't have any assistant superintendents, et cetera.
Where I'm the chief of police, I'm the fire captain, I'm the
Exactly.
You do windows too.
When you drive into Fallbrook, I always say, when you drive into Fallbrook, you get a false sense what the population is composed of because you see huge homes, some mansions, some just very big homes, a lot of acreage, a lot of fruit trees, etc. And yet our school population is 76%. We're pushing on 77, socioeconomically disadvantaged. We have the highest migrant student population in all of San Diego County, which is something to be said. We have a high English language learner population and we're at about 16% SPED population.
Students with disabilities, yes.
Yes, students with disabilities. Our numbers when it comes to McKinney-Vento, our homeless, and our foster maybe aren't as high as other districts, but we also serve a military base. And, many of the students there are transient students that have moved around a lot. And we know how that affects education as well. And that I think I always point out to the community, we serve universal meals. We were serving universal meals before it became a thing because of our high socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And it's always a shock
What does that mean, Ilsa? Universal meals for
Everybody gets free lunch. We don't even ask for income because our level is so high. It's at 76%. I know that politics right now are changing, and it's challenging. The threshold is if you're over 25%, then you can serve free meals without asking for the income verification. I believe the federal government is possibly looking at changing that to 60%, and even at 60%, we would still qualify.
goodness? And
Yes.
so historically, your achievement has had one profile, and the reputation of the education system had been for many, many years, and then entered Ilsa and company onto the scene. Can you tell us about what happened and some of the outcomes for students?
Yes. So, if anyone goes to the CDE website to DataQuest,
California Department of Education.
California Department of Education, and they look at our scores, they might say, well, these aren't great. And I will acknowledge that we can and we will do better as we continue to move forward. However, if you dig a little deeper, which is what I've done, and you look at our scores and you compare them to neighboring districts, and then you look at our demographics. So I do a chart. Here's the migrant student demographic of our neighboring school districts in North County. We've got the highest migrant ed. And then I look at the English language learner and I compare us to those same neighboring school districts. We're, right up there, maybe second highest. It's very high. And then you look at our special education, which is, like I said, at 16%, is high to California standards. It may not be the highest of surrounding areas, but it's still there. And then we look at our socioeconomically disadvantaged population, again, very high numbers. And then you look at the test scores through that lens. We reframe it, look at it through that lens, and now we are actually performing at or above these neighboring school districts that don't have the at-promise population that we have. And I think that makes a big difference. What I'm more proud of, our three goals are access, engagement, student outcomes. And that access being the first one is very important to me because I say you have to first give them the opportunity and then you engage them. And through that vision and the support, I have an amazing admin team. Everything that we've accomplished I don't take the credit for it. They're out there doing the work. But we have been recognized by the College Board as last year it was a bronze school. This year we're a silver school for access. And that's that we open the doors to that advanced placement program to all students. We don't have any roadblocks. It's accessible, high numbers of students that are usually left out. Our marginal populations are taking the courses and they're doing well. We have increased our A through G
Which is
requirement for the
university eligible
university
graduates.
eligible to, exponentially. And again, it reflects that now more students are getting, like you said, that quality education. And when you look at our continuation high school,
Yeah.
which is simply, I always say, when I think of continuation, I think of the poem by Robert Frost. And, two roads diverged in the woods, and these students just took a different path. That's all it is. They took a different path, and that has made all the difference for them, which is how the poem ends, and that has made all the difference. We have students that are now going to college, which was never something that they had even thought of, because the courses at our continuation high school are also all A through G aligned. And it's not a matter of let's just get you graduated. It's let's get you graduated and ready for your future.
Okay, let's stop right there. So for those who are out of state, so what you're saying is that students who are not in the comprehensive traditional high school, who end up matriculating in this alternative school, generally the thought is it's because they're failing out. And so this is a place for them to graduate. And very often, most often, I would say, the expectation there is to try and accelerate their credit granting, independent study packets, just get them through so they can graduate. And you're saying that your students at that school are being afforded the same opportunity to those college prerequisite courses as the comprehensive high school?
Yes. And here's the interesting thing. They were always being afforded those courses, but the adult mental maps that were in place of this is a continuation high school, therefore this cannot be college credit, was preventing the students from getting the credits that they deserve that would be recognized by those four-year colleges and universities. So we saw the teaching that was happening, excellent teaching. We saw the curriculum, same as the comprehensive. We looked at the textbooks, same textbooks. So why aren't these students receiving the A through G credit that will get them into a four-year college or university? And it was simply because someone had coded the courses as not college prep courses. And it took a lot of conversation with the adults about, why are we doing this? And then we changed it. We didn't change the teaching. We didn't change the curriculum. We didn't change the textbooks. We just changed the way we thought about the kids and what they were deserving of. And we changed that coding and they're getting the credit. And what did change is now when they get a D, which is passing, somebody will talk to them about, you should retake the course because if you get a C or better, now you're getting this college credit.
You just gave me chills.
I still get chills.
You just gave me chills. So it wasn't the case in your district that you inherited a school that was less than in any way. It was the mental model that had superimposed less than.
Yes, they weren't
Rules and credits. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Ilsa, I'm interested to know, before I ask you more about your solutions and how you arrived at these things, because you're starting to already hint at what it takes to move a mountain. What made Ilsa the Ilsa of today that enabled you to see what you see that others couldn't see? Tell us about Ilsa and how you became Ilsa. And I'll just say, and in there, can you give us, because I know you're going to, what your not on my watch experience or moment was in that trajectory that resulted in your career?
So it's funny because I noticed a difference when I was in high school. So when I was in high school, I was going to meetings with my counselor to talk to colleges, and my friends were not. And I was in ninth grade taking a science course, biology, I think it was, or maybe back then it was called something else. And my friends were taking a different science course. Yet in elementary, we had been in all the same classes. And in my schooling was strange. It was K through 4, then you went to a 5-6, then you went to a 7-8. But we had been together, and all of a sudden we're in high school and we're going to different classes. And I didn't quite understand why. And by the time I was a junior, and I was like, why are they only talking to a very small group of us about this, about college? I also started becoming aware, because I hadn't been aware of, why am I like the only Latina in these courses? But I was. And then when I learned a little bit more about education, years later, I was like, why are we allowing a 14-year-old to decide what they're going to do 4 years later? So as a freshman, are you going to college? No. Okay. These are the classes you're going to take. And I believed that if they then changed their mind, the doors were going to be closed, and that our goal should be all along to keep those doors open. So I tell my staff and I tell everyone, and I honestly, I wholeheartendly believe this. It is not our responsibility as educators to decide which kids are going to do what after high school. And it's not a responsibility or an obligation. Our responsibility, our obligation is to make sure that they are prepared to do whatever they choose to do when they graduate high school. So it kind of started there. And the not on my watch came later in my career. And I was working with students who had very maladaptive behaviors and they had made decisions that had gotten them kicked out of a school.
Okay.
And they were going to a community day school. And that community day
Hmm.
school, because of financial reasons, was going to close. And they were going to have to go to a county program. And busing wasn't going to be provided. And I knew the kids and I knew the families. And I knew that I couldn't be the person that sat across from that family and said, this is where your daughter, your son is going, and they're going to be okay. I was great at having the conversation because every parent said it to me. Oh, I can't send my kid to that school with those kids. And I'd be like, those kids made the same bad decision that your kid
Yeah.
did. But to send them away without support was very hard for me. And I thought, not on my watch. And the only way for it to not happen on my watch is to move higher. So, and that's how I ended up here. So it wasn't so much, I knew things were wrong curriculum wise. And one of the things I did as a principal every summer, I would go through every individual 9th and 10th grade transcript. And then I trained an assistant principal to do 11th and 12th, but 9th, because I really wanted to preserve it. And I would look at the student's history. I didn't look at the label. I looked at the history and I would say, okay, the students in English, they really should be in honors English. And I would change their schedule without asking them. And then I would say, the students in honors English, look at the trajectory. Nope, we're moving them down to English. And the reason I say I didn't look at labels, the number of GATE, students that had been labeled GATE that were in these high
Gifted
honors,
and talented.
gifted and talented, that were in these honors classes, but they hadn't been performing to that level. And the only reason they were being placed there was because of that little icon or the widget or the label that they had. And yet we had other students, maybe with no label or maybe with the label of English language learner, and they were staying in a regular course when they could have been challenged. My master's schedule would change dramatically. So I went from having one honors English class to 3 one year. And the students didn't drop when they came in because students and parents, especially in communities that are in survival mode, trust wholeheartedly in us as educators. And it's, well, if they say that's where you belong, that's where you belong. You stick to it. You do what they have to do, and we can't lead them astray,
For good or for bad, huh?
good or for bad.
In the book Where Equity Lives, we call this out and distinguish it from tracking, the theme resonating with back in the day.
Back in the day.
There was, before me, early me, there was tracking where, are you going to go to college or are you going to go to work? And there are two completely separate paths. And generally those decisions were made by the system, and it correlated highly to demographics. And so, it perpetuates the societal status quo.
Yeah.
So that became known. And so I think anybody in education in this day and age will reject the idea of tracking as being positive in any way. We've been socialized to know the evils of tracking.
Yes.
And yet, in the book, we call it new tracking. Whereas there used to be, and I remember, my cousin going to high school and being told, do you want to be a beautician or do you want to, etc. And somebody else would be given the college prep classes. And we don't do that anymore, but we have new sorting systems. And sometimes, most of the time, I would argue they're not for the insidious reasons that we used to do these things for. They're the unintended consequences of trying to do right in the name of differentiation, in the name of personalization, in the name of extra support, in the name of intervention. We have a host of initiatives across the country to help historically struggling students, but the unintended consequence ends up being this bifurcation of the system, and the net effect is tracking. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. And there is still a lot of work to be done. But yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So you came into your district, and by the way, as somebody who has worked for over 35 or so years in this field of this beautiful vocation of ours, in urban, rural, small, big, K-12 systems, K-6 systems, one schoolhouse system, all over the map. I can tell you the challenges of being in a small place are well misunderstood and humongous. You have no flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody out, my best example of this is if you've ever gone to a small parochial school system and there's one class in kindergarten and that's the only class and it goes up together. By the time you're in fifth grade, that fifth grade teacher's pulling out their hair saying, oh, these kids, there's no place to move them around. You have no flexibility. You're kind of very hamstrung. Magnify that with all the demands of high schools. When you're in a smaller system, it's no joke. It's not for the faint of heart. You came into this and you had your personal history, your convictions, your experience. You're not on my watch perspective. What would you say is the solution? You have We have this gap.
Yes.
We want to call it opportunity gap, access gap. Those are true. The net effect, however, is an outcome gap.
Mm-hmm.
Name the indicator: achievement, graduation rate, university eligibility, suspension. There's always about a 30-point difference between the higher demographic group and the lower, whatever those happen to be in a system. What should we be doing? What did you do? What will you continue to do? You're at the top of your game right now. You have a long way to go.
Well, we didn't make top-down decisions. The urgency is there. I mean, the urgency is there. And sometimes it would be easier to just make a decision overnight and change things. But then you don't bring anybody along with you. So we need to educate those around us. I'll go back to our continuation high school example. I could have easily gone in and just changed the courses, and then everybody would be upset that we did that without giving them a voice. So we have to educate our staff in why we want to move in a certain direction or why something is wrong. We have to educate our boards. We have to educate, parents, the public, everyone about that. So that's the first thing. And that requires, and you always talk about this, a very strong leadership column, because there's going to be pushback and you're not going to be liked and you're going to be challenged, but you have to remain strong and you have to remain a team. So one of the things here in Fallbrook is, was establishing that team. And I got very, very lucky in that I came in and within 2 or 3 weeks of my starting as superintendent, all of the administrators had quit. And not because, I'd like to think it's not because of me, but they had quit.
They didn't know you yet.
They didn't know me yet, but they had left. I had 2, I think, that stayed behind. So it gave me the opportunity to really look at who's going to come in here. And it required even me to make those tough conversations about, okay, this leader's already on staff, but they're either not standing firm to the vision and I need to talk to them about it. And that's never easy to do. But we did it, and many of them were given the will to leave on their own, and we brought new ones in and solidified that work. Also identifying and empowering those other voices that are sometimes, drowned out by the louder voices that want things to remain the way it is. One of the things that I was told when I came here by the community, by teachers, is we want the Fallbrook of old. And now I say, you have the Fallbrook of old. Look at our results. Because I'm sure that's what you meant by the Fallbrook of old. These amazing results. Our demographics aren't the same, but the results are the same. And that's what matters. And just clarity. So another thing that's very important, and I hear it all the time, is, people will say the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or there is so much on my plate. And there is. Teachers have a lot to do, and there's a lot of work. So we don't start something. We don't bring on an initiative. We don't bring on an app. We don't bring on a new course that does not support that vision of access for all, and it has to be rigorous enough to prepare students to be successful after high school. That's important too, because if it doesn't support our primary goal, then why are we giving people extra work? Let's just not do that. And that can sometimes be frustrating to some people that, have a pet peeve or a pet project. And we have to look at the instruction too, because some of those projects that people love aren't helping our students in any way. They're fun, but how are they tied to the standards? And having the conversations around that too. We could communicate our goal to students with a 10-minute video clip instead of watching the whole 3-hour movie, which just takes up instructional time.
The little things, those are huge. I'm reminded right now that you came in when relative to COVID.
Oh, my timing was perfect. I came in July of 2019, and then we shut down schools March 13th of 2020. So I hadn't even completed my first year. And one of the things that I am very proud of with this school district, with this admin team, and with the staff is that during COVID, we heard, over and over again, people say, we can't go back. When we come back from COVID, we can't go back to the same normal. And if you survey districts across the country, they went back to the same normal. The talk was there, but then nothing happened. We did not. And it was hard because COVID was a huge shift. And then when we came back, we started conversations about what we learned is that 6-period day, that traditional structure doesn't work for all students. So what can we do differently? And then we changed a year after opening to a trimester system. And again, a very heavy lift. We accomplished it over 2 years because again, even though the urgency was there, the first year was discussions, was educating, because the non-negotiable was we're moving away from a 6-period day.
Can you explain the rationale a bit so we understand what need you identified and then what solution you?
Yes, if I'm an English language learner, the state says that I have to have a 2-hour block of ELD. So if I take
English language development.
English language development, if I have 6 classes, 2 of those are ELD. So now I only have 4 classes. And then I need a PE if I'm a 9th grader. So now I only have 3 classes. And then I need science and math. So I've got 1 class left. And depending on the grade, if it's 10th grade, now you need social science. You have nothing to pick that you enjoy. It's all academic, academic, academic. This is what you need. And I don't get to take art or auto shop or, one of those courses. For our special education students, it wasn't the same problem, but it was a similar problem in that depending on what their individual education plan dictated, they might not be able to fit the courses that entice them to come to school, motivate them, fit those into the schedule, or to take courses that would qualify them to get into a 4-year college or university. And if you were just that standout all-around kid that wants to do ASB and choir and football and all the academics, they couldn't fit that into their schedule either. They were going to a junior college. Well, what happens is now we're not building those relationships with our own students. And the trimester system allows us to address all 3 of those situations, as well as for a student who's not sure, there's more flexibility for them to now take CTE courses or
career technical education,
career and technical education, or electives that might steer them in a direction of, oh, wow, I really like this. I was just never exposed to it before.
I'm wondering, one of the major ways that new tracking occurs, and that's a bad thing, is when students at some point don't do well in a semester. Let's say it's the first semester or the second semester of English, or let's say math, whatever their class is. And then what do? You take the whole class again next semester, or you wait the first semester and then just take the second semester in math, but now you've been away from it. Does this solution address that need in some way?
Yes, it does. They can immediately recover those credits. So in a semester system, in a traditional system, you might take English 1A and fail, and you still take English 1B, but then somewhere in the future, you have to make up English 1A.
Summer school or something.
Yeah. In a trimester, there's room in that schedule where you finish, you failed English 1A, you can now retake English 1A and also be taking your English 1B. Or you can improve the grades. The trimester model was the model of the continuation high school because it allowed students to recover credits faster without the packets. And that's why our staff landed on it, because I think they were more familiar. So now we have greater credit recovery. It's affected us in other areas. For example, our summer school numbers are now lower, but with budgets being cut, that's actually a good thing. And we are now reimagining our continuation high school because we don't have as many students going because they're making up their credits at the comprehensive high school. But we're also finding is it's that small setting that the students need. That's why they're struggling at the high school. It's not the academic, it's the size.
So so back to it's an alternative program. It's not
an alternative
program or a disciplinary. It's not a punishment.
No.
To go there. They're equivalent. It fills a different need.
Yes.
For students.
Absolutely.
So Ilsa, I'm hearing you say two things at the same time. Help me. When I asked you what was educate us on the solution of turning around historical patterns of underachievement, and you led with the adult issues. Interesting. That was top of mind. You have to bring people along. They have to understand the why, is what I heard you say. You have to educate them deeply so that they understand the rationale, that it's not arbitrary and capricious or a power play and all of that. You led with that. And then you said, oh, and by the way, there is a technical piece to this too. Instruction has to be excellent. The rigor needs to be high. Everything needs to point to university level preparation so that kids can have every life option available to them, their choice, not ours. We need to remove structural barriers like a schedule to enable more students to succeed. So is that how you see the solution? Having those
I do. It's looking at the system. And I think when we met, Robin, I asked, what makes this different? I've been an administrator. I met you in 2019. I had become an assistant principal in 2005. So I had been in administration for over 10 years. Throughout that 10 plus year journey, we were looking at ways to close the achievement gap. And, we were looking at different models. We were looking at different collaboration for the teachers, et cetera, but we weren't changing the system. So we were getting the same results, even though we were working really hard. And part of the system is, yes, your structures that you have in place, the beliefs that exist, and changing those to get a different result. And what are we can't only look at the data at the end of the year. I mean, we test them in 8th grade and then we test them in 11th grade. You're not going to make a big difference there. It needs to be frequent. It needs to be universal. Like we're all looking at the same thing, regardless of the label that the student might have, in order to really affect change. And we have to look at different markers, because by junior year, and this is, I think, what we're seeing when I said we don't have as many kids going to the continuation. Before, it's like junior year, oh, here's a list of the kids who only have 5 credits. Here's a list of the kids who only have 10 credits.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't we address it back in 9th grade? Because they probably failed all of that first semester. And now, because we're looking at that data on every 5 or 6 weeks, we know here's what we need to change, or here's where, here's the students that are struggling. Let's talk to them now. about how can we make school work for you and what you need to do to get to where you want to go, because we can't forget that from kinder to 8th grade, for the most part, they've failed and they've moved forward. And then all of a sudden they get to high school and I'm failing. And 4 years later, it's like, well, you're not going to walk. And
Right.
it's a shock.
Ilsa, you said something I want to ask you about sincerely. And you're right. The system is the structures, the policies, the rules, the practices, but fueling all of that beneath the waterline of that huge iceberg that is a school system are beliefs and expectations that humans have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hate on anybody for that. We're humans. I always say if you watch TV, you have ideas about people. There's no way you cannot.
Right.
You talk yourself out of them, but we're mere mortals after all. So the great debate is, and I wonder how you address it, if beliefs and expectations of adults of the capacity, the inherent capacity that different students and by group have of academic success, if those fuel all these things, do you first have to change people's beliefs before you change the system? Do you do that first?
You have to address it. Again, like I said, the urgency is there. You can never have 100% agreement, because then we would never change the system. I just say we need, consensus, and you need to be very clear on the non-negotiables, like the things we're going to do now, but then what is that going to look like? Another example is when we were getting ready to come back in some form from COVID, we went to our teachers and said, we're going to reopen, but what should that look like? And they had a big say in, it, maybe if we did this and maybe if it looked like this. So they were a part of that decision process. Did they all agree? No. Did they all agree on the trimester? No. But the majority did, and that's when we chose, to move forward with some of those decisions.
So I'm hearing you say, tell me if I'm right, but I'm hearing you say that it's kind of simultaneous. No, you don't wait for people's beliefs to change. You change the system, you just do it elegantly,
Mm-hmm.
maturely, with grace, leadership grace
Yes.
to bring people along. But you're changing the system
Yes.
as beliefs change.
Yes.
I I'm seeing a pattern in that, though some of the trainings and conferences and readings, that professional readings, would have us stop and at the beliefs portion of our trajectory before we do anything else. Let's talk about mind shifting. And I always think, gosh, I'll be dead by then. And the kids are in school right now. They're going to graduate.
Yeah.
We're trying to get them to a life better than the life that they would otherwise have.
Well, and some of the beliefs are never going to change. We see it. We have political beliefs, we have religious beliefs, and regardless of what anybody tells us, some of those aren't going to change. We're not going to sway one way or another. So I think we have to keep that in mind. But the way that this work started, and I wasn't here when it started, that when they started with you, Robin, and I think it's so powerful. I was here for the second one, is let's talk to everyone. Let's look at your data. Let's find what those barriers are. And I think it validated a lot of what the staff was saying. And there were, at the same time, a lot of ahas. We even see it now when we present data. When we did the Vista study 5 years after that, or 6 after that original one, staff were like, wow, I didn't realize that this group of students wasn't graduating at the same rate as everyone else. So bringing those facts that you can't argue are important. And I think sometimes where we fail is we want that canned program, that canned answer. And we forget that we're dealing with humans and individuals. And it can't be canned, because what works at school A isn't going to necessarily work at school B, because the needs are different or the problem is different. So the solution can't be the same.
That's and we're ending where you started in leadership. How that top of mind is, there's technical information and there's design and there are correct ways to open up access and opportunity to students.
Yeah.
But the trick is the leadership part.
Yes.
In Shattering Inequities, that book, we talk about the leadership trilogy, and I'm looking at human example of that on my screen right now, and it's choking me up. And the leadership trilogy that you're expressing right now, that you manifest, is leadership grace, leadership maturity, and leadership integrity. And I think sometimes when we have these gaps in whatever the metric is, the inclination in the world is to look to teachers. If they just worked harder, if they just stopped
Working really hard.
And when you're in that iceberg under that waterline, you see it differently and you realize the power of able leaders in moving this forward. And so with that, Ilsa, I thank you for sharing your experience and your results. I will say that during COVID and after, while achievement was declining, I happen to know that your district was the highest growth
Yes.
on student results district in the entire county.
Yes.
Which is a double digit, which is a county of very much have nots and very much have economic communities. So the results speak for themselves. What advice, what tips, what words would you share with those of us who, like you, are not on my watch, is having 14-year-olds just life decided for them based on probably when asked, what do you want to do when you grow up, would grunt and not even say anything. And if they did, it would be, well, I don't know,
Yes.
What would you share with us? What is the solution to challenging this inevitability assumption?
I think, definitely being a good listener. And I don't mean just, by what you listen, but what you hear. But when you're looking at the data, what is that data telling you? Because the data is telling you stories. The data will show you patterns and addressing those. Like I said, there is an urgency. And I've done this, Robin, the wrong way, and I'd like to believe that now I'm doing it the right way. I was at a school. I was a leader, very similar demographics, very, very low performing, and we knocked it out of the ballpark. We had the high results, etc. But I bulldozed my beliefs, and I led that charge, and I never turned around to see if people were coming along with me. And it breaks my heart to know that when I left, a lot of those things went away and it fell back to where it was before. So my goal now is to make sure that when I leave, that work continues because it's good for kids. And like you said, that comes down to that leadership column and having the tough conversations with the leaders and empowering them to then have the tough conversations with the staff that need it, and always doing so with an inquisitive mind. I like to think that when people say no, what they really mean is, I don't know. I don't understand. Show me. And we need to do that. So those courageous conversations that are so hard to have, we need to have, and continue, not settling, just continuously looking at, okay, now what can we change? Why isn't this working? And anybody who's been a high school teacher knows. I used to see it. I taught a lesson period 1 and it was wonderful. And then here comes period 2 and I did the exact same thing and it bombed. So, because we're dealing with humans.
Humans.
We need to adjust all the time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, meet Ilsa. Thank you. Thank you for everything you do every single day. And I am very happy to know that you're a young leader. And so you have many years ahead of you of changing the world one school at a time.
That is my goal. And thank you, Robin. You are an inspiration because like I said, when I met you and I said, what made you different? What makes your program different? What makes what you do different? It only took one meeting to understand what was different. And that difference is that in our first year, you trained the leaders. Like the leaders worked together to become a team and to have that same vision before we went out to the teachers. And so many times I had sat there as a leader at a PD on my computer because I have emails, I have things to do. This time we were actively involved because we know the work and we're the ones that are here to build those relationships with our teachers and answer their questions. And we need to be able to talk to the work, but most importantly, to believe in the work. Because just like kids, they're going to see right through it if you do not believe in what you are proposing or in your vision.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And we're beyond fortunate to have you leading this work and modeling it for the rest of us.
Thank you.
So that every student has that premium education and that allows them to make every life option available to them upon graduation.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ilsa. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Shattering Inequities requires more than conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future of education together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for all students. Thanks for listening.